So now we have a project with two tracks in it, and both these tracks are actually duplicates of one another. And the reason we did that, as you might recall, is so that we had one track that contained, on the one hand, all of the first major edits that we made, which in this case was just splitting the track into separate regions, each region having a different speaker in them. Okay, and we did that mainly as a way of being able to have something to refer back to if we need to rebuild or repair changes that we made later on in the project. So I've gone ahead and locked that track. We called it master, and just to make this sort of insurance track, if you will, clearly unavailable, I'm going to go ahead and click on the mute button, which grays that track out. This does a couple of things, but the main thing we're concerned with is it makes sure that whenever we are playing back our project, the sound in this original track will not be playing as well. We don't really need to hear it again ever, unless again we're using it as a point of reference to try to recover or rebuild part of our project. Now, in the meantime, we have this new track, which is going to be a working track. And the first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and change the name of it to Alex. That way I know who's speaking on that track, okay? Because our next step is going to be to isolate the regions on this track to only contain the audio with Alex's voice in it, okay? So what happens to the regions that do have my voice in them, for example? What I'll go ahead and do now is go to Track, and select New Basic Track. I'm now creating another track with nothing in it, and I'm going to drag it up here, put it right below Alex. And what I'll do next is go through the Alex track, and I'll find everything with my voice on it in this case, and I'll drag those regions down into this No Effects track. But actually, before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and rename this track, and I'm just going to call it Scratch Track. I could also, if I wanted, call it Daniel, so then I would know absolutely whose voice is on there, but for our purposes, I'll just call it Scratch Track. Now, the next thing I want to talk to you about is how to go about selecting regions and bringing them down into this next track. Now, the first way to do it, especially if you were working on your sound collage project earlier, is you can simply click on a region and then drag that region down. Okay. Now at this point you could continue to preview a region and then select it, drag it down, go to the next region, drag it down. But there is another way you can approach this, and that is to, when you locate a region that you want to make a change to, hesitate a little bit there, but we can fix that. Okay, you can go ahead and continue. You've selected that by clicking on it. Now if we go to another region and listen, if you hold the Command and Shift keys down, you can click on that region, and now it's selected. So this is one way of being able to select non-contiguous regions. Okay, continuing on. Start off and tell us a little story about. Okay, Command Shift, selected that, and again finding another spot. Ice fishing. Okay, Command Shift, click, and now I can take these regions and move them down all at one time. Alright. Now, that is a way of saving time, but as you can see, there's also some danger involved as well. For example, you need to be cautious that you have only the region selected that you actually want to move. Sometimes you may inadvertently have a region selected that you didn't actually want to have selected in the first place. So now we've gone through and we've moved all the respective regions to the appropriate tracks. And at this point the real challenge begins. This is where we actually start building the interview up. And what I'd like you to do is be considering what parts of the interview are the most important to you and which parts don't necessarily contribute to telling the story the way you want it to be told. Now, I had you build a scratch track where you took the audio that you really weren't going to use and moved that to that track. Now I'm going to have you create an additional track, and we're actually going to call that the interview track. So again, I'll go up to Track and New Basic Track, and I'm going to double click on the name there, and I'm going to call this Interview. Okay, and the reason for this is that I'm going to go ahead and leave Alex intact up here, and as I find parts of his interview that I like, I'm going to bring those down into my interview track and build it that way. So again, I'm keeping things isolated. And the nice thing here as well is that as you start to play back what you're building, you can use the option to essentially mute all the other tracks so that only the track you want to listen to is audible. Okay, we'll get to that in a moment. So one of the things I wanted to do was kind of start this final interview off with a little bit more of a bang. And so Alex at one point in the interview said something along the lines of love at first sight in regards to fishing. So I want to find that particular bit first. So I'm going to mute the scratch track because again there's nothing that I really want on the scratch track, so I'll mute that. Okay, so now as I play back,
Dad, when I was young, and
you see you're not hearing anything except
young and hadn't done it probably.
So let's go back up at the
I
beginning.
think it's kind of like love at first sight.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead, and I have a couple different choices here, and this is really up to you how you'd like to work. But you can simply take this region and drag it over to the interview track, or you can copy and paste it over. That's really up to you what you want to do. With a shorter project like this, copying and pasting is probably not a bad idea, but again, it's really up to you. So in this case, I would have this region highlighted. I can go to Edit, Copy, then bring my playhead over to the very beginning or wherever I want this copied track to go into. I'll select the interview track and then simply go to Edit, Paste, and now I have a copy of that over here. Again, it's still along the same lines of not messing with your original content. That's sort of the reason why copying and pasting is one way to go about it. But again, you can always simply select a region and drag it over as well. That's entirely up to you. Okay, so we got this first bit of Alex saying this.
It's kind of like love at first sight. I used to fish with my dad when I was young and hadn't done it probably since I was 16 or 17 years old. And for whatever reason, I just...
Okay, and notice I actually made a mistake here and did not mute all the other tracks. So again, you sort of heard a little bit of a overlap.
The itch this summer that, you know what, I want to go fishing again.
So I'm going to come back down here and select the mute all option, and now when I play this track back,
I used to fish with my dad when I was young, and
you won't hear it overlapping with any other
for
audio.
whatever reason, I just got like the itch this summer that, you know what, I want to go fishing again.
Okay, so let's say that's what I want. I'm going to start off with that, and I don't want to hear anything else. So I'll go ahead and split this track here, Command T, and take the portion of the track that I don't want, and simply delete that. Okay, now I know at another portion in this, Alex was talking about fishing with his son, so I'm going to go find that portion as well.
I think it's kind of like love at first sight. List of things that I'd like to buy.
Did you start fishing with your dad like when you were a kid?
Yes. My dad was a big fisherman when he was young because he comes from Puerto Rico and lives...
Okay, so let's take that segment too of Alex talking about fishing with his dad and how his dad was a big fisherman. So again, I'm going to select that and I'll copy it. I'll come back down here to my interview track, make sure that's selected, and bring my playhead right over where I want that bit to come in, and paste. Okay, so now that's in, and I can massage that into place if I want. But I'm going to make a few changes to this region as well, so let's listen to that a little bit more.
At Dominican University. And yeah.
Again, make sure to mute everything else. Play back.
With your dad like when you were a kid?
Yes. My dad...
Okay, so he starts off with my dad. So I'll go to that one section. Again, I'm going to split it. Get rid of that one part that I don't want. And bring this over. Now this is actually a good opportunity also to mention to you about naming the clips as you build them. So you'll notice here, if I double click on the title of a region, I can actually go in and change it. So I can title this Love at First Sight. So I know now that this region contains that. And as a matter of fact, when you're actually going through and previewing your interviews, you can actually go through and do that in the before you start assembling the interview, which is to say I could have gone up here to the Alex track, okay, and I could have been identifying each one of these regions within the Alex track, if you understand what I'm saying, so that before I even start rearranging and things like that, I could have already identified what areas have a particular meaning, which is to say why I would put a particular title on that. It makes it a little bit easier to go back and find the bits of the project that you want to get to quickly. Okay, so love at first sight. And then the second one was called My Dad Was a Fisherman. Okay, and so on. All right, so let's go back a little bit here and see what we did.
My work at Dominican University.
Again, make sure to mute everything else except the track you're listening to.
My dad was a big fisherman when he was young because he comes from Puerto Rico and lives close to the river, and so he did a lot of river fishing. So us growing up, we didn't fish as much, but I can definitely remember at least 2 dozen times, going out and fishing. It wasn't like I fished
Okay, so 2 dozen times going out and fishing.
2 dozen times, going out and fishing.
Okay, and we're going to leave it right there. Now you notice there isn't a perfect moment of silence to go out with. That's okay. As long as you have the audio that you want in here, that's what matters. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead, Command T, and again, I'm doing this rather quickly for you, but I'm just going to delete that at this point. Now, last but not least, I want to find a segment where Alex talks about fishing with his son, so I'll do that now.